Hello, everybody. I am Connor, and I just saw a couple of films recently. Both of them are probably going to be getting awards consideration. Both of them were just nominated earlier this morning for Golden Globes. I'm going to be talking about Lady Bird and The Disaster Artist. If you can read titles, then congratulations. You hit the right title. These are both films that were directed by people who are predominantly actors. The Disaster Artist is directed by James Franco, and Lady Bird is directed by Greta Gerwig. I'm going to talk about, and I saw it first, and I've been marinating on that for a little bit longer than Disaster Artist. I just saw that earlier today. But I'm going to give my scores up front because I'm going to go into full spoilers on both of these. I'm going to give Lady Bird a 7.5 out of 10, and I'm going to give The Disaster Artist an 8.5, also out of 10. So that is the scores. If that's all you care about, go away. Now I'm going to get into the meat of the reviews. So the first film I want to talk about is Lady Bird, directed by Greta Gerwig, also written by Greta Gerwig. I should probably mention that this is her first time solo writing and solo directing. She has co-written 5 films, and she has co-directed one film back in 2008, and she also co-wrote that film as well. So this is her first feature solo outing, and I think the most notable thing about this film is that it had a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes whole time. It had a limited, I think it had a festival run first, and then it had a limited release, and then it expanded wide. And it had a lot of good word of mouth, and I think it had a 100% on Rotten Tomatoes for like the first 187 critics, somewhere in that ballpark, which broke a record. It had more positive reviews at a 100% than I think the first Toy Story was the one that held that record, and then Lady Bird broke that, and now it has a 99 because one person gave it a lukewarm review that was angling negative. So, what is Lady Bird? Lady Bird is a coming-of-age story about Saoirse, and it stars Saoirse Ronan in the titular role. I believe the character's name is Christine, but she demands to be called Lady Bird, and it's called Lady Bird. So I will call her Lady Bird. She is a senior in high school, Catholic private school, because of some family reasonings, and she lives in Sacramento. She does not like living in Sacramento. She wants to go to college on the East Coast, and she wants to just get out of Sacramento. Laurie Metcalf plays her mother, and then what's this fellow's name? Someone else plays her dad. And it's really the story of her life in this year of school. And as I said before, it's a coming of age story, and she's a little unlikable. She doesn't like where she is in life, and she just wants to move on, and she has a very antagonistic relationship with her mother. That's the basic plot summary that I could give. It's more of a slice of life type thing. It's more character and dialogue driven than plot driven. And I will say this was a very good movie. I really liked it. Didn't love it though, and I wanted to because I am a sucker for coming of age stories. I love Saoirse Ronan, and I could just say right off the bat, she is the best thing about this movie. I think she is incredible here. And but considering other coming of age stories recently, I think of The Edge of 17, and I think of Boyhood, and I think of I can't think of any else, but I think of like those two, for example. And I prefer those movies to this. And I think that the biggest thing that this movie has going for it that's not Saoirse Ronan is it's a strong debut from Greta Gerwig in the director's chair. I think that it feels like a directorial debut. It's rough around the edges. Some of the sound editing and ADR is a little spotty here and there. The shot composition isn't particularly captivating and strong. It is pretty workmanly, but the film editing is very good. And there is some sound editing that I really like. I'll get into some examples later on, but there is a strength to this debut, and I can't wait to see where Gerwig goes. I will say I'm very taken aback that this had a 100% for so long, um, because 100% on Rotten Tomatoes basically just translates to everyone who saw it would at least recommend it. And uh, usually films with higher percentages aren't like necessarily great films. They are films that have a larger broad appeal. That is why J.J. Abrams' first Star Trek movie has like a 94% or something like that. It's not a great movie, like at all. It's okay, but it has a broad appeal. And so that's why you have stuff like that. But then also great films also have 100% or like you have 90 percentiles. And then when you have great films, a lot of times great films will have people who just don't like it as much as everybody else. That's why the original Blade Runner doesn't have a 100%. That is why, yeah, The Godfather doesn't have a 100%. There are going to be people who don't like, especially if something's heralded as a great film, that causes hype, anticipation, and higher expectations, and that'll drop. So I was surprised this, of all things, had a higher percentage than any other film on the site of Rotten Tomatoes for the longest time, because this central character. She is a little unlikable, as I said. She's a bit of a misanthrope. She just wants to get out of her life. And it really reminded me of, oh, I should have said another coming of age movie this reminded me of was Brooklyn, which Ronan. Um, yeah, last year we got The Edge of 17, which starred Haley Steinfeld, and that had a similar protagonist, a young woman who is a senior in high school, and maybe she wasn't a senior, but I think her brother was. But sick of everything. She doesn't like her mom. They have a very antagonistic relationship. There's a falling out with the best friend character, and the main character is like not the most likable person. Uh, and that didn't get as much critical acclaim as this one did. And I don't really know why. If this got so much, I don't know. I can't pick what grabs a lot of other people and what doesn't. Just from my perspective, they seem very similar, and I liked Edge of 17 more. um, let's try to get into some areas. I'm just going to start with Saoirse Ronan right now. I'm going to get into that. Saoirse Ronan is absolutely delightful and wonderful. I think she is one of the three best young actors working today right now. Unlike Chloe Grace Moretz, she's good at picking, or she just so happens to be in better stuff. Saoirse Ronan, did her penance with The Host in 2010, 2011. And since then, she's been in Grand Budapest Hotel, which she was really funny in. She had a small part there, but she was good. And then there was Brooklyn, and Brooklyn caught me by surprise. That movie I really, really liked. I remember watching that for the first time and really being blown away by her specifically. And here she does a similar thing, not in character of Brooklyn, but in character approach and attention to detail. Saoirse Ronan entirely inhabits a character. She fully realizes it, and she inhabits this character so naturally that even parts of this character that we probably won't see, and I'm speaking broadly for a lot of these performances I see from her, I know how she will respond and act in those situations. She has such a fully realized performance that it is captivating and wondrous to behold. I feel like that sounds like a box quote. I don't care. She is that good. She is my front runner for Best Actress of the Year for the Oscars and all the awards. I'm sure she will get it. This really hasn't been a strong year for leading women, but I think she really deserved it for Brooklyn. I think she's in. I think I don't know. She's just as good here, I think, and a lot of people seem to really be recognizing this role more. So if she wins all the awards, I will not be opposed to that at all. She is delightful. I really like this film's sense of place. It really does feel somewhat autobiographical from Gerwig. I'm sure it is. I don't know really anything about her other than she was kind of like the it girl on the indie scene. She is Her partner is Noah Baumbach, who is a filmmaker I find obnoxious. So I don't really care about his work. But I remember seeing Greta Gerwig in Mistress America, finding that movie to be a complete slog to get through, finding it obnoxious and irritating, but thinking she had a lot of screen presence and charm, and she had chemistry with everybody. And I just wish she was in a better movie. And then last year I saw a movie called Maggie's Plan that had Greta Gerwig in the titular role, and then we also had Ethan Hawke and Julianne Moore in that film. And I really liked it, and she was also really good. She doesn't really seem to have a whole lot of range. She does kind of have that cool girl kind of vibe, but she does her thing really well, and she is very charming and charismatic. So uh, this central character of Lady Bird does feel like a Greta Gerwig character. I, having seen films that she has co-written, and now seeing a film that she has written, this feels like Greta Gerwig wrote a lot of this film. It has a very kind of sharp, wry wit to it, and it's mostly noticeable in just a handful of scenes, but for the most part, it is naturalistic, and it doesn't feel like all the characters sound identical, and that's a relief. This isn't Aaron Sorkin we're talking about. They characters sound different, and that's always cool. And Greta Gerwig, the writing for Lady Bird does sound like a Greta Gerwig character. Um, I really like the editing here. The film editing particularly is good. There's a lot of there are a couple of montages. I think they to a degree bookend the film of Lady Bird walking down a sidewalk, and you'll see her journey that her daily walk from home to school, and it's almost shot and edited like a Wes Anderson film. Like she's center of the frame, and she stays at the center, but the background changes behind her. Now she's walking through a park. Now she's walking on a sidewalk next to a market. Now she's walking along the gates next to her Catholic school. And that stuff's pretty neat. And I liked the sound editing. The one in particular that I liked was the countdown. There's a countdown to a the new year. And it is, you hear the countdown from 10, 9, 8, 7, and it goes all the way down. And it's cut to her trying to get to the post office to mail something. And there was a bit of a tension of, oh, is she going to get in the door on time? And I thought it was almost the employees at the post office counting down till when the post office closes. But no, it's just counting down to the end of the year. And I thought that was really, really cool. Stuff like that I found to be neat. But there is a couple of spotty ADR moments. Let's see what else. What else we got here? I particularly like, and this is, I think, the biggest thing that a lot of people are enjoying, is the relationship between Lady Bird and her mother. I love this character. I love the character of the mother. Uh, I think one of the biggest problems with this movie is just how unlikable I found uh, Lady Bird, despite how good Saoirse Ronan is. And I could always understand Lady Bird, and I could always understand where she's coming from. And I related to her in certain areas. I was a lot like this character in high school. Um, and that's not a good thing. and uh, but I was never rooting for Lady Bird the way I was rooting for Haley Steinfeld in The Edge of 17, the way I was rooting for Ailish in Brooklyn, the way I was rooting for Mason in Boyhood. Um, she was just too unlikable. And while I always knew where she was coming from, I didn't really connect with me the way those other characters did. Um, but the mom character, I don't know, maybe I'm just getting to that point in my life where I'm relating more to the person who has to work two jobs to make sure their house, they can live in their house and they can feed their kids, and having a little hell spawn as a child is just the worst thing ever. I was always siding with the mom, and I think that's the point. I think the point is that you're supposed to look at Lady Bird and understand that she has hopes and dreams and ambitions, but also understand that this is a character where she thinks she knows everything, but she doesn't. She doesn't have a lot of experience, and she certainly doesn't have a work ethic. So this causes some struggle between her and her mother. And there's a lot of neat things about the relationship, and not just between it, but the overall family dynamic that is implied, never really spoken about, and we don't need to really talk about it because there's no reason for anyone in the family to really necessarily talk about it. I really like how the angle of the depression with the father is handled. It is handled like a real way that like parents don't want their kids to really have a whole lot of extra stress on their lives. It's mostly a problem that doesn't concern the whole family. So as a result, they just don't talk about the burden of a parent going through some kind of mental health issue. Uh, and I really liked the father character, and I like how you look at what Lady Bird does and how this could be contributing to the father's insecurities, especially when you think about him having depression, and obviously will add. It doesn't necessarily add to the mother's insecurities, but it adds to her stresses. She's a less insecure person than the father is, and there's this ongoing thing about the father being someone who just always wants to be liked and always wants to be the nice guy. And I know a lot of people like that, and there are people in my family that are like that, and I completely got it. And there's an approach and an understanding and an empathy to all of these characters. I'm going to draw comparisons to Richard Linklater, who is one of my favorite filmmakers. I know most people don't like him as much as I do, but I love Richard Linklater. Um, Similar to Linklater, there is a healthy dose of empathy towards all these characters. I feel like Greta Gerwig likes most of these characters. Linklater likes all of his characters. Gerwig likes most of her characters. Um, there is a angle that I'm going to get into here that the narrative structure and the character approach almost seem to be at odds with one another. But for the family dynamic and the her first boyfriend who ends up being gay, like all this stuff is very smartly handled. It, like I said, it feels autobiographical, like someone has lived this and is transcribing events, but putting it into a fictional context. Obviously, I don't imagine all of this is true to life. It just works too well on a screenplay level to be true to life. Um, I like that there's a part in the film where Ladybird falls into the popular clique, like there's a popular girl who's also like kind of like the mean girls stereotype to a degree, and she starts hanging out with all these like high-minded philosophical douchebag types, and I like that it's all it's almost like the dangers of like in it's Ladybird's desired indulgences taken to their furthest extreme. And on a narrative level, I like how that works very well, and how it ends up self-destructing on her, and how shallow and empty they are. On a narrative level, that makes complete logical sense, and I like that. But I think when it comes to Gerwig's approach to character, it's a little shallow. There's nothing beneath the surface to these high-minded douchebag hipster types. There's nothing there, and that's a problem. Her second boyfriend, the guitar player guy, I think the actor is like Timothy. I don't know, Chalfont, Twin Peaks people will get that, whatever. Um, but he he's so vacuous and so vain and self-serving, and it almost felt like that character, the mean girl character, and her boyfriend, they all felt like characters ported over from the Neon Demon, where they're just so vacuous and empty on an emotional level, and they're so irredeemable. It's like, why would anyone want to hang out with them other than they're hot? Personality, they don't have any empathy, they don't like really like outside of like a car that one of them drives, they don't really have stuff. And it's implied that I think there was an implication early on. I was going to talk about this, but I think I got off track. I apologize. Where uh, there's a moment where the father character loses his job, and then Lady Bird is told by her mother that maybe if you're nice to your classmates, we don't want can you pick up your garbage or pick up your laundry and make it look good, because people you go to school with, their parents could employ your father, and they wouldn't want to employ their father if they saw that that his children looked like white trash. And that felt like something an adult would say. It's trying to navigate the politics of just trying to get by and have enough money to get on by. um, and so I kind of saw then there's a moment where Cicerone's character, Ladybird, where she has a new perspective on something, and so her hanging out with like the pretty rich girl and her friends, that felt like she was doing that in an effort to try to win the favor of them, and in doing so maybe lead to her father getting hired. It's never talked about, and that's never really touched on. She just sort of like falls out with them because they're vacuous, unlikable people completely. There's nothing redeeming about them. That's the problem. Um, so it never really ends up going anywhere. And I think that maybe it's just implied that she tried something and then got selfish, like she usually does, and then kind of gets bit in the butt because it's like, again, her deepest indulgence is taken to the furthest logical extreme. Like I said, narratively it holds together, but I think on an approach to character level, it kind of goes against a lot of the grain. It makes her look a little bit worse, and from a narrative level, again, I get it. Narrative structure, she has to reach her lowest point at the end of Act Two, but I don't know. I feel like I've just been hammering this point home too much, but I did like this movie. I think that one of the best things about this movie is um, the way they approach religion. So none of this family isn't religious, I don't think. um, it's a thing where her older adopted brother saw someone get stabbed at public school in the parking lot, so they sent them to the Catholic private school so that they didn't have to worry about that. That works. I like that. And then while he was there, and this part isn't explained, this is all implied, and they don't address this, but it's so clear that this is the story that's happening. This is a strength to Gerwig, where his her older adopted brother um, met a girl at the Catholic school. They got together. They had premarital sex, and her parents found out about it, kicked her out. So then Lady Bird and Miguel's parents brought in Miguel's girlfriend as a way to live with them. And there's like they're very big hearted, and they have a servant's heart, so to speak, even though they aren't. I don't think they're religious. It seems like they're only getting involved in like Catholic because maybe one or both of them grew up Catholic, and they just tried to find a way to make sure their kids weren't going to go to school to get harmed. Um, but regardless, Ladybird goes to a Catholic school, even though she's not Catholic. She's a bit of a tomboy, a rebel. She eats the communion crackers with the Jonah Hill sister, and then um, at the end, though, when she finally goes to the East Coast and gets away from home, she gets homesick, and she's kind of. It seems obvious that she's missing where she came from, and then she sees a Catholic church, and she goes to mass, and I really like that approach of this isn't really something I was a part of on a spiritual level, and in terms of on a religious level, but it does spiritually connect her to home, and it's a part of her. She might not. I don't think this character believes in the Catholic belief system, but it's an important part of her life because that's where she comes from, and it's a way to connect her to home. And I think that's true for a lot of people when it comes to some sort of religion where they can't completely absolve themselves from that part because it's a part of their upbringing, and it's a way of connecting them maybe to their heritage, maybe to a point in time in their life. And it was a very smart and mature way of approaching that sort of stuff, where that felt autobiographical. That felt like a real person. And again, none of the stuff is said. It's all shown to us visually. It's another element where Gerwig really has a firm understanding of visual storytelling and the filmic language, and it's really cool. And I want to see where she goes. I really like this movie. It's really good. Trying to think of any other things I'd like to say. Lucas Hedges is here. I saw him in Manchester by the Sea last year, and I got absolutely no read on him. He was a bit of a cipher to me, just didn't do anything for me one way or the other. He was present on screen in a movie I didn't like very much. Not to say it was a bad movie. That movie did absolutely nothing for me. Here, though, he's all right. The scene where he has to come at not he has to come clean to Lady Bird, and they kind of got to get some baggage out of the way. He kind of breaks down. That whole scene felt so natural and real. He's talking too fast, like a real person does when they have all the stuff they want to get off their chest. And then he starts freaking out and crying, and then they hug, and then there's a very long silence. Again, this felt naturalistic and real, and I like that. But him wigging out felt like somebody pardon me, felt like somebody acting. It didn't feel like this was the way somebody would break down. It felt like somebody trying to break down because they are acting. I'll say that one time though, I liked him here. I thought he was pretty good. Timothy, I can't remember. I'm just gonna call him Timothy Chalfont. He he's in Call Me by Your Name this year. I want to see that. I have not seen Call Me by Your Name yet, but hopefully he's better there, because he's just kind of like a Yoda hipster douchebag who has nothing to work with. Like I said, and then Odeya Rush is also she's the mean girl that Lady Bird befriends. I don't get how these people behave on a basic human level. They're so detached, and there's a part where so Lady Bird lies about where she lives because she's embarrassed that she lives in a lower income place than the Odeya Rush character. And then Odeya Rush goes to the house that Lady Bird lied about living in. And then she comes in, she's like, "Oh, this is your house?" And she's like, "Yep. Are we still friends though?" And I'm thinking, well, any normal person would be like, "Oh, I mean, I don't care where you live. You just seem like a cool person." Like any normal person would do that. No one is like this. And I thought it was beneath Gerwig on every other character that aren't like this trio, but mostly a duo of characters. Every other character had, if they were going to be like, "Oh, I don't like you because you're poor," there would be a reason behind it. There would be, we'd get like a scene to just imply something that influence that puts that shows some kind of clarity of to why they are this certain way. Because that's the thing, people are a certain way through some kind of upbringing, through some kind of experiences they've had or lack thereof. And there's an element of oh my gosh, are we still going to be friends? And then she's like, "Oh well, I guess you're still dating Timothy Chalfont, so I guess." I mean, I understand being in the same social circle, but like I'm saying, these characters were so vacuous and so stupid. And then she loses her virginity to Timothy Chalfont, and then um, they have a micro argument, just barely anything of an argument. And I guess they broke up, And then she's like, "Oh, are we still going to prom together?" And he's like, sure, whatever. I'm like, why? Nobody is that vacuous and empty that it's just implied that you broke up with them because you had a minor confrontational situation. It was that was unendingly frustrating to me. But but I should say that there's a really good sense of poetry to the writing here. I like how her older brother's constantly looking for work, and the father is constantly looking for work, and they have the same degrees, and then both of them end up applying for the same job, and then the younger of the two, so Miguel, Lady Bird's older brother, ends up getting the job, and that was really cool, just from a story level. And I really like, again, there's such an empathy and attention to detail in approaching the characters, where the father is so open-hearted and he wants to be the nice guy, but he wants that job, but he also has a son that he wants to be better off than him. And so instead of being like, no, don't apply for this job because I want the job, he gives him pointers and he gives him tips, and then he toasts him for getting the job. And it's so cool. I can't really think of a more articulate way of putting it. So I liked Lady Bird. Uh, I give it a 7.5 out of 10. I would highly recommend people watch this movie. Maybe not rush out to theaters to go see it. I think that uh, if you can, like, maybe rent it on DVD, catch it. If you really want to watch it, go out and watch it. You will probably like it. If you don't like unlikable central characters, I wouldn't check this out the way I would recommend Edge of 17. That was a movie that somehow throughout all the baggage, I still I was still rooting for the main character, even though she was so self-centered. And people watching this are probably gonna be like, "Oh yeah, it's because you like Haley Steinfeld more." No, I think Saoirse Ronan is a better actress and more attractive, so you can't get me on that front, ha. Um, but yeah, I would probably recommend Brooklyn and Edge of 17, and I would always recommend Boyhood over most films. But I would recommend you check out those like coming of age. If you really want a coming of age kick and you haven't seen those other ones, check out Edge of 17 and Brooklyn. They aren't getting the attention that Lady Bird is, but check out Lady Bird if you want to. All right. Next movie up is The Disaster Artist. Um, so, don't know anything about this movie. There's this movie called The Room from 2003. If you are watching this, you probably know what The Room is. 2003. This guy named Tommy Wiseau released this movie called The Room. Tommy Wiseau produced it, directed it, wrote it, starred in it, and executive produced it. He produced it twice. There's a reason behind that. And then it is one of the best bad movies ever made. It is hilarious. It is a man who is not a filmmaker, who is not a good writer, who isn't talented in that's mean, but he wasn't. um, but he was passionate and he had a dream and he put out this movie called The Room, and it's hilarious. And then everyone else found it to be this way, and it started a cult sensation similar to that of Troll 2 and Manos: The Hands of Fate and Plan 9 from Outer Space before it. Theaters, had midnight screenings of The Room, where it quickly gained a cult status and a so bad it's good stamp of approval from anybody who saw it. So that was The Room. The co-star of The Room, a man named Greg Sestero, wrote a book about the making of The Room because he had known Tommy Wiseau throughout before and then throughout the production of The Room, and was a lot more understanding of people's response to this film. And then he wrote the book The Disaster Artist. And then flash forward to 2013, James Franco goes to one of these midnight screenings and is like, oh my goodness, this is a real thing, and then gets into doing gets into checking out what this thing called The Room is, and decides, okay, I want to make a movie about the making of The Room. I will play Tommy Wiseau. My brother Dave Franco will play Greg Sestero. It will be called The Disaster Artist, like the book. And this is our movie. It is a movie about the making of one of the best bad movies ever made. It spans from, I think, 1997 or 1998 through 2003 when the Room was released. Um, so that's the plot synopsis. I kind of loved this movie. And I imagine a lot of other people won't like it as much as me, and that's fine. Um, James Franco is a man who I mostly only know, or I only know him from in front of the camera stuff as an actor. Um, I know that he has directed a lot of stuff, and I have seen all of none of them. He, in terms of feature-length films, in feature-length narrative fiction, he has released. This is his 12th film. Uh, he made a short film, and he made a documentary. So all told, this is his 14th directorial effort. And he's got like 2 or 3 on the horizon coming out in the next couple of years. The guy likes to work. So I guess you could call this a movie review of 2 things that are directorial efforts from people who are mostly known as actors. I think I might have already said that, but I don't care. And similar to Greta Gerwig, good directorial effort here, a little rough around the edges. Like to see where he goes from here, but he's been directing for a long time. Maybe he's set in his ways. I don't know. Uh, I think Lady Bird's probably a better directed film, but it's maybe a little bit more impressive because it is a debut. Um, the Disaster Artist is. I guess I should probably talk about The Room. This is a movie that is kind of near and dear to my heart in some ways. I got really into movies in about 2000, late 2008, early 2009. So really kind of at the tail end of 8th grade, middle school, and then into high school. And I started watching a bunch of movie reviews and getting into kind of the movie online sphere. And that's kind of really where everything started to take off. Spill.com had been around for a little while. There was a really old channel called Fury the Film Fan who had kind of been big man on campus in big man on the block in terms of like new movie reviews. I remember Tom Chattelbash was kind of actually reliable back then in terms of like regular output. This was before Jeremy Jahns and Chris Stuckman really were who they are today. Chris Stuckman put out a couple of stuff before he went away for some time. And the schmoes, I think, were still waiting to be. Anyways, so that's when I started watching this stuff. And I remember I watched The Nostalgia Critic, and somewhere in there he released a review for a movie called The Room, which I'd never heard of. And I was like, holy crap, what is this? And I became obsessed is too strong of a word, but I became fascinated by The Room. And I immediately gravitated to all the jokes, oh, hi, Mark, hi, doggy, I did not hit her, it's not true, like all that stuff. And I would, and no one else knew what it was besides my brother and I. And I remember I went to school, this would be in high school, and I told some of my friends that they had to know what this is, and they were like, they didn't really believe me that it was this weird thing, but one of them finally checked it out and was like, holy crap. And so it almost became a bit of a thing around some people at school, and I think I might have started it, but who cares. But it's a bit of a thing that I have a bit of a connection to, it means something to me, and I think it means something to quite a bit of people. It is a so bad it's good movie for an entire generation, and Tommy Wiseau is such a perplexing figure. So when I heard that they were doing this, I was like, intrigued, obviously. After a couple of years of like all the room stuff, you kind of get a little tired of it all when you're around it all the time. Like everyone always goes for the easy stuff, like the I did not hit her, I did not. Oh hi Mark. Oh hi doggy. Like all that stuff. Oh hi. Oh hi. You are tearing me apart, Lisa. All that stuff. And I kind of prefer like the less obvious stuff, like, oh Peter, why are you always playing psychologist? I hear everybody's Tommy Wiseau impression. Um, yeah, so and then I did watch The Room at one point in there. Like I watched it on YouTube, and I think that was kind of where I was coming off of my like fascination with it, and so it was really late at night. I don't really remember it. I know what The Room is. I've seen that movie before, but I don't really remember watching it because I was less interested in it when I watched it. So we finally got this movie, and I really enjoyed it because besides just being something about something that does mean something to me in The Room, it's a movie about making movies, which is a little niche genre that always is going to interest me. I want to be a filmmaker. I have a desire to make films. It's a dream of mine, and it's always inspiring to see these, even when they're about horrible movies. I've not seen Ed Wood. I want to watch Ed Wood. I don't really like Tim Burton, but this is before he became 21st century Tim Burton. But I do want to watch Ed Wood. But in terms of The Disaster Artist, I think this is going to be something that film fans are really going to enjoy. Uh, Younger film fans will enjoy. I think in terms of like Generation X age uh, film buffs, they're always going to have Ed Wood and see this as the inferior of the two. But The Room is a little bit more relevant to people in my age demographic. People are going to like whatever they're going to like. I'm speaking mostly in generalizations here. But this kind of got to me in some ways. I think this is the closest I've come to crying in a movie this whole year. It's not my favorite film of the year. It's not Blade Runner 2049. But when this thing ended, I wanted to just get in front of get on a word processor and just start writing a movie. And I got filled with inspiration, and yeah, I just wanted to do it. You just do it, as Tommy would say. I think that this movie, like uh, Lady Bird, is rough around the edges in a lot of its production. There is stuff to really poke holes in here. It's not a particularly deep movie. It's not. Besides the Tommy Wiseau character, there's not really great performances here. Dave Franco, I really liked, but he's not giving a really nuanced, diverse, dynamic performance. But he's good, and he's everything that Greg Sestero needs to be in this story. I really liked how this movie was both a narrative 3-act film and also true enough to life at the same time. And I think it did so with flying colors. I think that it also gets better as it goes along. I think the earlier stuff, it reminded me a lot of The Wolf of Wall Street, where there's that opening stuff when Leonardo DiCaprio gets a job at a bank, and that's where he meets Matthew McConaughey, and then it just goes under, and then he loses his job, and then he has to find a new job, and that's how he ends up creating his scam. Uh, there's a whole business here of Tommy and Greg going to LA to try to pursue their dreams before they get so down on their luck they decide to make their own movie. And that stuff feels rushed. Like, and not in a traditional sense. It's not like everything there's. It feels like there's scenes missing. It feels like we just really want to get to the stuff with The Room, but we need to give you enough of a backstory. And every scene has Greg and Tommy in it. And I really wanted to see more of how Greg is reacting to with other people and how conversations about Tommy are without risk of Tommy being around. Uh, there's a couple here and there. There's one where he's talking to one of his actor friends whose career is really taking off. There's one where he's talking with his mother early on, but they're brief and they don't really get beneath the surface. And Greg is meek and doesn't really want to talk a whole lot. Uh, I, I I wanted to get more of that perspective before they started production on The Room, and I wasn't quite on the film's wavelength yet. I think if I went back and saw it, I might like that stuff a little bit more. But once they start production on The Room, I think this movie might just be perfect. At least to me, it was a perfect viewing experience to me. I got how it was. This is just a ludicrous story, right? You have this guy who is unendingly wealthy. Somehow he just has a bottomless pit of money. We don't know how old he is. We don't know where he comes from. He's almost like if you came up with a character like this in a movie, it would be contrived and it would be just a quick fix to get your ball rolling. You wouldn't fly in a real movie in a fiction story, but in a that's what makes this true life story get away with that sort of stuff, and that's where the based on a true story isms benefit the film, where he's so perplexing and like this guy is real, but he's also complicated and he's a difficult person. He clearly has problems with human interaction. He has a very strange voice. He's very self-centered and manipulative and self-destructive, but he does have feelings and he really does want to express himself. And he does see himself as an artist, even though he's not good. Um, but it breaks my heart to like say that after seeing this because like he wants it so bad, and it's all really well tonally balanced. I found or unbalanced. It it jumps back and forth, and I felt like I was Greg, like really unsure where the situation would go. Tommy's so unpredictable, and it's kind of frightening, but also um, engaging and entertaining, and it could really lead to something big. But it also can be emotionally abusive to some degree, and it is fascinating. And I found the Greg is the heart and soul of this movie, and there's a whole sequence where they meet Bryan Cranston, who plays himself, and his girlfriend knew him prior, and he could have his big break, and all that sort of moral dilemma of loyalty versus like and like self-interest versus loyalty to somebody else, and that was all so. It's nothing special necessarily. It's nothing groundbreaking and revolutionary, but in this story it challenged their relationship in a way that I was that did concern me, that did make me want to know how it would happen with so person involved. It personal relationship, and I should say James Franco is really good here. I don't really know much about. I don't know. I've never disliked James Franco, but he's never really been a standout to me. He's just, oh, it's James Franco. He's fine. He's really good here. He's not doing so much an impression as a take on the character, and he sees him as a character, and that's what I think is good. The difference between James Franco's Tommy Wiseau and any other impression that you'll find of him is James Franco does seem legitimately intrigued and fascinated by Mr. Wiseau. So I like that a lot. There is a great thing here, though, about why artists like to do stuff. There's a scene where they're all eating lunch, and the woman who plays Claudette, the actress who plays Claudette in The Room, Jackie Weaver's the actress playing the actress, and she has a line that says, the worst day on a set is still better than any day at a normal job. And it's that risk versus reward and the idea of some kind of artistic fulfillment and what artistic expression does to somebody, and how rewarding and satisfying that I got chills, and my eyes started to mist up. And it's such a small little scene, small little line. And then at the end, there's a whole sequence when we have the room premiere that I started getting a little misty eyed just thinking about, yeah, he did it. I mean, it's nothing deeper. It's not particularly deeper than what they're saying, but it doesn't need to be. It's not subtle. It doesn't need to be. It is a proper, this is a story that speaks for itself. And this approach and the way they tell the story understands that. And it simply is what it is and doesn't try to be anything. It they understand the importance of the story they are telling uh and the message, and they aren't treating this like it's some grand Shakespeare thing. And in doing so, it meant a lot to me. This is in my top 10 movies of the year so far. I have not seen Three Billboards. I'm watching that tomorrow. I have not seen Shape of Water. I have not seen Call Me by Your Name. I have not seen about half of the big front runners. But this is in my top 5 of the year. I uh, I loved it, even though I recognize its imperfections. Zac Efron as Chris R is hilarious. Seth Rogen's really good here. The Josh Hutcherson as Denny is really funny, and it's not really. It doesn't feel like a joke casting. It's not like, guys, look at, it's Josh Hutcherson from those. He doesn't have like a dramatic close up or like a big reveal where he steps on and then like the movie pauses so you can laugh at it being Josh Hutcherson. It's just, oh, that's Josh Hutcherson as Denny. That's really funny. Yeah, I really like this movie. It put a big smile on my face. It put a little mist in my eyes. I didn't cry though. I'm trying to remember the last time I cried in a movie was Sing Street, which was last year, last summer, as a matter of fact. So about 18 months. If anyone is watching this in the future, I really like Disaster Artist. I'd give it an 8.5 out of 10, as I said beforehand. Yeah, it really spoke to me. I think this movie speaks for itself. Well, that'll do it for me tonight. I think these movies are pretty good. I have not been paying attention at all to the live chat. I don't think there is. I've just seen 0 viewers constantly at the bottom, which is fine. I mean, I have like 3 subscribers, sorry, 75 subscribers, and I just did this on a whim. And it looks like the live chat is completely empty. So yeah, I don't think I will be doing any of this. And I think most of my subscribers know me from the work I did over at Geekvolution, and this is not concerned comic books or comic book movies or really anything of that sort, which is fine. Yeah, Ladybird 7.5, Disaster Artist 8.5. I'll try to maybe do more of these Oscar movies, just live, talk about what I think of them. This has been a very interesting year because a lot of my favorite movies are not getting talked about on top 10 lists and not being talked about for awards ceremonies. With the exception of, I mean, I love Twin Peaks. It's a TV show, though. That's popping up on some people's top 10 lists, even though it's a show. But yeah, outside of that, like Blade Runner is getting no love. Baby Driver got a nomination for Ansel Elgort, and that's it. Lego Batman, like the Lego movie, is getting no love at all. War for the Planet of the Apes was like number 10 on A.O. Scott's list. One of my favorite movies of the year. Disaster Artist is probably the highest profile awards contender that'll be on my list. Yeah, so it's going to be an interesting year for sure. There's so many, and like Logan's getting nothing, but Wonder Woman's getting all the acclaim. I can't begin to even think about how that happened. Logan is such a better movie. I did like Wonder Woman though. Don't get me wrong. It was better than Thor Ragnarok. Wonder Woman was better than Thor Ragnarok. Get off my back. Um, yeah, I think I've just been rambling now. Anyways, thank you guys very much for watching. I'm Connor, and I will see you guys next time. Have a good one.